Hello, Kenku. I've been thinking a lot about life paths, about how I got to where I am and where I'm going, about how many of the junctions were my own versus how many of them were things that just happened around me to some effect. There's plenty of merit to the idea that you have to take control of your life and make of it what you want, but you can't really control everything. Sometimes life just happens. Other people's choices can have a disproportionate effect on your life rather than their own. We grab as many factors as we can, but in the end, there are always some out of reach. Sometimes these uncontrolled forces are trivial. Sometimes they reroute our entire course. These thoughts have been present for many reasons. How I got to where I am, where you will end up going. I've been thinking of the life paths of others I may have helped or harmed. The thoughts are most immediate in my games. When playing D&D, there are many ways to develop your character as you level up. The moderate approach is to pick your class and just follow its progression. Maybe you see a couple feats or spells to strive for. Maybe you take them when you get there. Maybe you realize something else may be a bit better based on what the other party members can and can't do. A little planning, but nothing too strict. To one side of this median is the build optimizer. As the additions of D&D have progressed, the core game has become increasingly player-facing in the power progression as the characters level up. While the DM can give out magic items and bonus abilities, players can know exactly what powers their characters are guaranteed at every level of the game. Players can pre-build their optimized characters before campaign even begins and slowly check off things down their list as the game goes on. Pre-planned progression characters can be very powerful, but sometimes they lag behind the power of the rest of the party for a little bit until they come online. They have to get a specific feat or hit a certain level in a multi-class. Many of these characters are built to be very powerful as mid or high level characters, but their early levels are exceptionally rough to play through. This could easily be sample size bias on my end, but the few times I have played in campaigns with pre-built progressions, the players seem to have less fun. There was an air of waiting for when it would be perfect rather than playing right now. For my primary example, the character died just as it was starting to come online, and I felt horrible about it. There is something cruel about a predestined character not living to see what they had decreed for them. On the other hand, I have run plenty of high-level one-shots, and I would guess about half of those characters were pre-built progressions spared the grind of early levels to get to be played as intended. I am all for players playing the game the way they want to, but my experience just tells me that there are arenas better suited to this style of gaming. All of that is on one side of the moderately paced character. But what of the other? What of the unplanned? Throughout my current campaigns, I have at least 4 players that have let me know that their character's level progression is currently based on the story. While they have some desires of spells, feats, capabilities to come, when a level up hits, I have heard them say, "I really want this feature I planned on, but my character's going this way instead." All of these characters are multi-classed. Some of them intended to be from the beginning, and the story-based leveling determines which class they take at level up. Some of them are multi-classed purely because of the story. A berserker barbarian that switched over to zealot before diving into paladin. A rogue who dipped into warlock based on some RP encounters with an imp and signing an in-game contract that I may have let the player decide if there was an additional clause in invisible ink they had not seen. Actually, let's tangent there. I just want to take a moment to apologize for the amount of warlock packs I try to hand out. I have been called out on it. I just really enjoy taking the story element of warlocks being tempted by power, and I like to include that temptation as an element in the games. But this does bring me to my point. I run a slightly more narrative-based game. While I'm not a master thespian or story weaver, a lot of my game, a lot of my story, a lot of my plot is based in subtext. Our stories are derived from how characters emotionally and personally react to things, more than grand landscape combats with the PCs playing the pivotal points of the whole world. Because my games are centered on how characters internalize the story beats and react to them, having players base their characters' level ups on story not only separates the player from the character, but pushes the character towards me. If a character's level up is story-based, the story beats I provide become the guidance. The players are writing the story shared at the table, but I'm the one planning the big story beats for us to craft the story around. Even if I don't create a railroaded story, I could accidentally create a railroaded character. Different classes carry different levels of story with them. While anything can be reflavored, certain flavors take more to cover up. Fighters and rogues are relatively blank slates with mechanics just to create a power difference. Their power comes from personal skill. If the power comes from an outside source, the story holds far more sway. Clerics, paladins, and warlocks are defined by their relationship with the greater powers that grant them boons. This goes so far that previous editions had the options of becoming X and fallen versions, stripped of their powers purely based on choices made in the story. Where does that put me then? I want to tell an enticing story. I want to respect how my players choose to play the game. But I don't want to take away my players' choice of what character they get to play. If a player is going to develop their character based on the story told, I suppose my goal should be to make a story that is open to interpretation. Sure, include paths with signposts, but also common greens to play around in. In the end, the player should always be able to choose the character they get to play. That could be taking back control on a level up to reinterpret what a level up choice means. It could be the player coming to me and saying, "This is the direction I want to take the character," so that I, as the game master, can reroute the landmarks we will be driving by. As much as I want to tell a good story, have the character's actions matter and for them to personally change based on the world, this is still a world that we all control. There are so many other times in life that we don't get to control what happens, why we are where we are. The real world is where we have to struggle and fight for what we want, with outside forces telling us no anyways. While that same experience can be mirrored in the game, it doesn't have to be. You get to choose who you are, and I shouldn't tell you otherwise. This is my SendingKenku. Life will feel like a railroad at the start. Once you grow, you can step off at any stop and begin walking wherever you wish.